Unit 11 test review. Number 1. Using f of x equals cosine of x as a guide, we want to graph g of x equals 3 times the cosine of 4x and identify the amplitude in the period. So identifying the amplitude, it's always the absolute value of a, which the value of a is the number that the function is being multiplied by, which is 3. So we know that our amplitude is a equals 3. The period is 2 pi over the absolute value of b. Our value of b is the 4, what's being multiplied by the x. So it's 2 pi over 4, or in other words, pi over 2 when you reduce that down. So that means one cycle for cosine must take place within pi over 2 units. Now, I want to graph the original cosine function on here for you first, and then we'll see how 3 times the cosine of 4x becomes a transformation of cosine of x. So first, all I'm going to do is graph cosine of x. Now, cosine of x has a amplitude of 1, so it lies in between positive 1 and negative 1. And the period for cosine of x is normally 2 pi. So we know cosine at 0 goes through the point 1, so that's where this first point comes into play. Now, a full cycle is 2 pi, so at 2 pi, the graph will be back up at 1. Now, the halfway mark in between 0 and 2 pi is where we will be at negative 1. Now, the halfway point between 0 and pi is where we cross the x-axis. Then the halfway point between pi and 2 pi is where we cross the x-axis again to come back up. So we get this part of our graph. Now this trend just kind of continues on the other side of the x-axis. Here we are. Now, graphing our new function, 3 times the cosine of 4x. For 3, the amplitude means that it's not now just in between positive 1 and negative 1. It's going to be in between a positive 3, so all the way up here, and a negative 3, so all the way down here. Now from there, we know that the period is pi over 2. So originally it was 2 pi, so a full cycle occurred between 0 and 2 pi. Well, now a full cycle will occur between 0 and pi over 2. So we now have the point 0, 3, because the amplitude is 3. At pi over 2, we're going to be back up at 3 because that's a full cycle. Now, halfway between 0 and pi over 2, we're at negative 3. So we're at the bottom of our graph, the lowest point it'll ever reach. Halfway between the point that's at 0, 3, and this point down here that's at negative 3 is where it crosses the x-axis. And then it crosses the x-axis here because I know that between 0 and pi over 2, I need to have started at my maximum, gone down to my minimum, and back up to the maximum again. And now that trend just kind of continues. So we find that this graph is very, very, very skinny and tall. So we just continue this all the way down. And now we're going to do it on the other side of the x-axis as well. So my points maybe aren't exact for those that are lying on the x-axis, but do your best to find that halfway point. And in purple, that is our new graph.